Normally, I'm not a believer in what I'd call fictitious fairy tales like werewolves, vampires, and such. But I will acknowledge when I find proof of the existence of unknown animals that I didn't previously believe in. I've spent a lot of my time in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, exploring and looking for caves to dive into. I've camped out there many times. I've heard all sorts of wild, hairy tales. Things that will make your skin crawl. I, too, have found evidence to believe that there might be a predator at large that's far more potent than your typical mountain lion or black bear. I've come to find evidence of what I would best support the hypothesis that there is indeed a large alpha predator, more likely a wolf, that dominates much of the range on this mountain. I've heard stories where people talk about seeing bright lights, or even Bigfoot. I can't confirm nor deny any of that. I myself have had zero experiences with all of that. What I can confirm is the things that I know I have found that I cannot explain, and evidence that would point to a large, upright walking predatory wolf. The first major player in the evidence that I've mustered is finding large canid prints in multiple spots on my trek. There's one major component to these tracks, and it's that they don't adhere to your standard wolf-sized tracks. Your standard wolf track, on average, is around 4 inches in width and height. These that I've found are easily doubled, if not a little larger than double, and the indent is very visibly noticeable. This leans toward the fact that whatever large canine made this is not only larger, but much heavier due to a deeper indent into the soil. Here's where things get even hairier. They don't follow your typical quadrupedal pattern that a dog or a wolf would follow. They are bipedal by the pattern, following a 2-step pattern with a 4 to 5 foot stride. Massive strides. Does this support that there is some sort of large upright walking wolf around these parts? I'm not sure myself, although the evidence I've found seems to strongly show support of that for my findings. The real kicker to it all is I have found 4 to 5 sets in total of these same large canid bipedal style footprints throughout my time out here, all in varying locations and different spots. I struggle with the concept because I believe that if a wolf was to walk bipedally, it would walk like a bear in the sense where they only walk for a short distance. But the longest stretch of tracks I found went on for well over 15 feet. All of these tracks were much in the same with indentation into the dirt, size, stride, and stepping pattern. It's possible that there could be a large pack of wolves out there that have grown to an abnormal size, learning to walk bipedally for short distances at a time. I have never found sets of tracks where it's more than just one. These are all just singular wolves that I've found on my time out. That is just one, what I like to call set of evidence, if you will. Now, I'm not saying what I'm about to tell you is necessarily evidence leaning towards my hypothesis, but it makes you wonder what's going on. What's killing these animals in the way they're being killed? I have discovered multiple deer and 2 black bears on account, dead. To dive into details a little more, I'm going to discuss with you the black bear deaths. Black bears do inhabit these mountain ranges, and although I don't see them as much, I do know they are here. I respect their space and that this is their home. To my knowledge and understanding, black bears don't have any predators that are above them. They don't have to worry about being killed due to them being omnivores, and their size and stature alone is enough to ward away mountain lions, for example. I'm sure a mountain lion and a bear have gotten into it before in nature, but I wouldn't put it past me, but I don't believe that is how these 2 black bear that I found were killed. I had come to almost a small valley where there's more tree coverage and lots of rock. Great as a protective enclosure with a small little cavern-like den. I had stumbled upon an actual black bear den. If I hadn't traveled down a 50 feet steep rocky incline of this hill into this little pocket of an area, I wouldn't have found what I did. Outside this small bear den, I know it was because I did check out the den after finding these bears. I discovered the cadavers of what looked to be 2 deceased black bears. The manner in which these black bears were killed was gruesome, to say the least. Both bears were within 10 feet of each other, killed by an unknown and unforeseen predator. The larger black bear, what I believed to be a male, but I didn't check, only judging by its size, had its head completely torn off its body. There was no head to be found anywhere around the area or visible vicinity that I was in. All along its body was large, deep gashes that looked to come from claws of great size. It was a bloody mess. Although the blood was coagulated, you could tell whatever happened that this bear suffered severe damage. The other bear, which lay no more than 10 feet away from the other bear, appeared to be smaller in size and frame. My guess was a female. As with the first, I didn't think in the moment to check the genitalia. The similarities and damage to this were mainly the deep gash wounds all over its body. It made me think of grizzly bear gashes, how they're so long and run so deep. These bears' body were shredded. The claw pattern wasn't even that of a bear though. It was different. If we're being honest, the flesh was far too mangled to get an accurate look as to what any claw pattern was exactly. The difference between the two bear is that this one was smaller, had its entire throat torn out. There was a lot of dried blood around it. Both of these bears had just died within the last day, judging by the freshness of the kill, so they were still rather fresh. Had I not wandered down into this area, I wouldn't have caught this grisly scene. Sorry about the pun. I just wanted to shed some light into a bleak scenario. The smell of decay hadn't even hit me until I wandered into here. The tree coverage and enclosure was so thick with rocks, it was almost encasing this area loosely, if that makes sense. I can see why it made for the perfect den spot. Anyhow, after spending maybe a few moments observing these dead bear and looking for any clues, I found bits of long, stringy black hair. This hair did not belong to the bears, but something else. I found it in small clumps in random sizes around the general radius of, I'd say 20 feet around us if I had to guess. The dirt beneath our feet was disturbed. I could see there were tracks of both bear and another animal, but I couldn't make out anything distinct. There had been too much ruffled dirt. It was clear there was some sort of fight, a struggle, and some form of mountain predator tore these bears to shreds, ripped off the head of one, and tore the throat out of another. Last I checked, mountain lions don't kill like this, especially not 2 black bears. Their claw size also wasn't capable of making the gashes that I saw. These were huge. The entire scene of this upset me so much, I had to get out of there, and fast. I figured whatever did this to these bears was still close enough to this area. So, I'm left with the question, what does that to a black bear? I always thought black bears were pretty much never challenged by other animals. I guess I'm wrong. Then I think about large canid tracks that I've seen over the years, and I can't help but put 2 and 2 together. I've never seen anything like the black bear seen since then or before. I'm not sure if those tracks have anything to do with what killed those bear, but I speculate it might. If the tracks I found really do belong to some unknown upright walking canid that lives out there, you're talking about a several 100-pound canid predator. Wolves themselves are large, so something more than double its size and bipedal. Now that's scary. Who knows what kind of damage, if exist, this animal could truly be capable of. The last and only other out-of-place findings I've really had have been deer. I found deer dead in all various ways of being killed. Just in the mountains, of course, which is the context here, where I primarily spend much of my time. I've seen them with their throats torn out and mangled, which could easily be explained by the current standard predators in the area. Then there are the ones that I find are stranger than fiction. 2 ways, actually. The first is I've only found maybe 4 in total like this, but these deer are ripped to pieces. Quite literally, I mean that. torn to shreds. Whatever killed it didn't even bother to eat it, only tear it to pieces, including its guts and all. Some of them were more disemboweled than the others, but they were generally just ripped apart. The worst one I found was a young deerling, slightly older and larger than just a little fawn. All 4 legs ripped off its body. The body was ripped in half with intestines spilling. Head and neck were both ripped off and apart. Part of the face was smashed in from the left side, and it looked to be smashed by a large rock to me. This small fawn, like the rest of the other deer I saw that died this way, are found within a small space, no more than 30 feet from each body part. It too was a bloody mess, as all of them are. Of course, my spacing estimates are just guesses, of course. Nothing is ever formulaic. This fawn had to be there for a few days, so it was decaying thoroughly. But surprisingly, there seemed to be no predators that had come and taken the free meal. The fawn didn't even appear to be eaten on, just butchered. Some of the other deer I found were in fresher states of decay, as all the kills I find are usually fresher. Probably because, out there, the bodies can decay so quickly due to climate. The same case was said for the other deer that I had found. Virtually 0 signs that they were eaten on by not only what killed them, but anything other than maggots since. There is 0 known predators that will kill a deer, tear it to pieces this way, and not eat on any of the meat. I see no reason, any logical reason why any predator would waste food in that way, considering it takes time and energy of the predator to take down a prey. Biologically and by nature's law, it doesn't make sense. It's something I'm still researching and looking into. What animal kills prey aggressively just for the sake of killing? Number 2. The other way that I'll find them dead is far more disturbing in my opinion, just because of how unnatural the death itself is. I found more like this than I have torn to pieces. These ones die and have random parts of their body cut open, or missing parts of their body, with no signs of blood. In fact, the first doe I found had both of her front legs and right calf and right half of her face gone. They looked to be perfectly cut out, like a fine laser or something. No drop of blood, and the body had begun to mummify under the sun. There were 0 signs of decay other than that. No flies, no signs of maggots. Not even an odor of death or decay, actually. No signs of predators even coming to check out the cadaver. This doe was probably a week old dead, if I had to guess. It was just lying there in the middle of a small clearing, higher up in elevation. Other deer I found that were killed in this manner had very similar death patterns. Another one I found had its entire neck and head missing. Bigger doe it looked like, but the same as the first. No blood, no signs of decay, or flies or maggots. Not even predators. No smell of rot or death, and the cut once again looked surgical in nature. It was extremely clean, not a single imperfection was made. They were so clean that it looked to be man-made. At the elevation I was at, I had no answers for these happenings, because I go to areas not others go to. Why would somebody be out here taking pieces of deer? It just doesn't add up to me. That also does not explain the strangeness of it all. No smell, no animal or insect touching the body. It's weird to me. Things just don't die and not give off an odor. All of this paired with the killings of both bears is kind of frightening, to say the least. Adding the deer in, and assuming there's all one big grand connection here, don't mind the conspiracy. This might be some sort of undiscovered, lone canid alpha predator. I'm no stranger to the weirdness that goes on in these mountains, along with many other mountains in the country that are notorious for UFOs, Bigfoot, and other things of that nature. I know the natives out here have many stories about these mountains, as well as a plethora of explorers and hikers alike. However, the things I've told you about are really the only encounters that I put in that category of mysterious. Everything else has just been pure survival in the wilderness. For me, to believe there is something, there needs to be a strong, suited sense of evidence for that something. That's how I've always lived by, and this situation is no exception. I cannot deny the evidence that there is something that is somewhat canid. I have no idea what it is, and others that I have talked to and spoke to don't seem to know or have an idea. Everything I know and have heard points in the direction that it is not an existent animal currently. Then we go back to the deer and the bear situation. That's very unnatural of any predator to do, whether it to be another predator or its prey. Maybe this is all a part of the weird stuff that goes on. I will continue to be vigilant, aware, and respectful of my surroundings, of the animals and places around me. This value is held true, especially when I am out in those mountains. I can't say for a fact what I've pieced together is indeed a real living creature, although it very much so is in my head. But it is definitely evidence that is based on something. What I'm not sure, I can only hope to find those answers as time goes on. This happened to me about a week ago. I live out in a big area that's primarily used for agriculture, so there's seldom houses and lots of long empty roads around here. Because of this, my nearest neighbors are about a quarter mile in both directions. Beyond that is sparsely spread out neighbors on both sides of the road, with large fields full of varying grains and plants. Between properties and areas of housing, there are large amounts of land for cattle. Think flat plains with a few trees here and there sprinkled in. Because of this, there's not a whole lot of traffic going on either way of the road. Most of the time, the entire road is dead. It makes it enjoyable for living out here. So, I have a 5-month-old son that is in this new sleep phase of his where he needs to be put in the car at night and driven to sleep. Usually, at night, I will put him in his car seat and put him in the car, get in and go for about a 20-minute drive, turning around at a certain point and driving him back. This always seems to help him lull him into sleep and works every time I do it. Alright, so now that we've got some background info cleared, here's what happened. About a week ago, it was around 10 p.m. at night. It was clear out, decent weather. Not too cold, not too hot. I come out, put my son in the car and hop in, pull out of the driveway, and we're on the road driving. If you keep driving down a road, it just continues on straight, with a sharp 90-degree turn that heads south. This road continues only for a few houses on either side, but mostly vast empty farm fields and grasslands that haven't been used. It's pretty barren. On both sides of the road, there is the typical road ditch that you would have, and then there's a small fence. In these ditches and along these fences are very tall grass. I don't know if wheatgrass is the correct term for it, maybe just wild grass. It's the tall grass that you see out in the country that reminds me of how wheat looks. It gets very tall along here because it's never cut. This is important, and I'll explain why here in a minute. I need to mention that because we live where we do. Animal and nightlife is very common. Deer are nocturnal by nature, so we see does by the dozen out here all the time. Blacktail, actually. Skunks are commonly seen just as much as raccoons and possums. You'll even see the occasional coyote sometimes, but that's more rare. We have cougars and mountain lions out here since they come down into the valley, but I have not personally seen one yet. Deer will sometimes pop out in front of your car at night. Same with other smaller critters. This is just something anybody that lives out here will know about and understand as common sense. I know there's wild animals at night. I just don't know what it is that I saw. I know it was not a deer, plain and simple. Okay, so I'm driving down this road, and the road begins to incline slightly. As I'm going up this long, drawn-out, slow incline, I notice the tall grass rustling on my passenger side, or right side of the road, and it's caught in my brights. I immediately get ready to brake because I'm thinking it's a deer about to jump out across the road, or maybe a skunk or something, and up stands this dark shape, hyena-looking animal that seemed to stand up on 2 legs. It was tall, taller than a man. It scared the crap out of me. It all happened so fast within just a few seconds, but I got a look at it. It reflected a dark crimson kind of eye shine, because my brights hit its eyes. It stood up out of the tall grass, facing my direction. I don't know if it looked directly at my vehicle, but I saw its face. It was very twisted and hyena looking. I wish I could describe it better for you, but I can't. It gave off a really bad vibe that I felt the second I saw it, and it lingered. It was this horrible feeling I felt in the pit of my stomach that just screamed I shouldn't have seen what I did. When I first saw the grass rustling, I had let my foot off the gas, but not pressing the brake. As soon as I saw this, I had about 3 seconds of shock and, "What is that?" and then slammed the gas to go. The whole time, trying to rationalize what it is that I saw and what it could have been. Even though I got to see it from the front, I couldn't see any specific details like what its arms or hands looked like because they were down on its side, but it resembled a very hairy person with an ugly hyena-looking head and face. That's what I made out from the few seconds of my brights hitting it through the grass. And then, that evil feeling. Gosh, it's hard for me to type this out without getting chills just thinking about it. I've never just felt that overwhelming sense of evil before. Once you feel it, if you ever have felt it, you'll know. It's uncomfortable. The spot I usually stop to turn around at, I sat there for a minute and hesitated on what to do because I had to turn around to go back home. The exact same road. I didn't want to cross that spot again and see that thing. After sitting there for maybe 5 minutes, debating with myself, I talked myself into doing it. I was very nervous the entire drive back home, even though it's only a 10-minute drive back. As I drove back through that spot, I didn't see the animal again. I even looked in the same spot I saw it before. It was gone. The feeling too was gone, and it didn't seem to be anywhere around that I could visibly see. Anybody out there who's listening will understand where I'm coming from if they've ever had a sighting that's truly frightened them as this did to me. Whether it be something that doesn't exist or a true animal, fear is fear. There's just something far more to this than seeing something that I didn't know what it was. It invoked this awful feeling of fear and dread. I've never had that happen before. I don't think it was a natural animal either. Nothing besides bear will stand up on their hind legs like this did, and it was skinny looking. The face is what still haunts me when I rethink about this encounter. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but thought if I told you about my sighting with whatever this animal is, I could possibly get some answers. What did I see that night? Years ago, I was working as a chemicals operator at a company near the airport here around Huntsville, Alabama. I was scheduled to work a third shift, and I had extra time on my hands before going into work that night. So just before dusk, I went down to a swamp I knew had some good bass and bluegills to try out some new fishing lures I had just bought. Now, mind you, this is in the afternoon hours, and some people were still driving up and down this road, getting home from work, so traffic was pretty frequent. As I stood along the edge of the road in the swamp, casting my lure out, I hear a very large tree snap and crash in the backside of the swamp. I've never heard a tree fall in the woods naturally before, other than someone with a chainsaw cutting it. Then, 2 minutes later, another tree snapped and crashed close to the same area. Totally not a coincidence, so I'm no longer fishing at this point. Instead, I started walking down the edge of the swamp on the road to get a better look into the woods. I couldn't see anything moving or standing, at least as far as I could see anyway. Since the sun was going down behind the swamp, it was very dark in those woods. I started to hear something running towards me. I wasn't scared because I could tell it had to be small, running my way. Then, out of the thicket of the woods, came a red fox running straight at me and passed by me by about 2 feet, crossing the road, not even looking for cars or anything. It was completely scared out of its mind, like something was hunting it. I turned back towards the swamp that this fox had ran from, and I could smell it. the smell of a wet, dead goat that had been rotting in the hot summer sun for about a week. It was god-awful too. I got that eerie feeling that I should leave, so that's exactly what I did. To this day, I've never gone into those woods to investigate what made me feel that way. I know that foxes don't normally run toward people, but that fox was scared of something in those woods, and it didn't give a damn about me or heavy traffic. No, I didn't see a Bigfoot or a Dogman, but then again, I have never seen a Black Panther either, and I know they are real. 2 trees falling, fox running by my legs, that horrible smell and that eerie feeling. Too much to be a coincidence for me. I took my cousins out for a night stroll out this last month. Some backstory. Usually every May, a lot of my family will go out to my wife's cousin's house, which has tons and tons of woods surrounding it. It's very peaceful. Every May, a lot of us cousins will go, see each other, and have tons of food and hang out for a few days at a time. Think like a big Christmas get-together, but instead it's in May. This time, we decided at night to do some night hiking around these parts, to explore and to see what we could see. My wife's cousin has great sets of high-powered flashlights. They're the rather expensive kind, but they work great. They have multiples of them, so I decided to take a few of the little ones out with me. So it was me and my 3 little ones, aged 8 to 13. So maybe not little ones, but they're still just kids. The entire time we're walking around, we aren't seeing a whole lot of anything. Mainly just deer from time to time, and that's about it. They were terrified that a cougar was going to get us, because cougars are nocturnal hunters. But I kept them calm, letting them know that we were making too much noise to draw in a cougar and would scare it away. That's when they decided it would be the best idea to travel into even thicker woods, where the underfooting wasn't as safe due to unseen rocks and brush. At the time, I wasn't aware of that, so I said of course, being in the moment and not wanting to disappoint them. I feel like bravery got the best of all of us as we traveled into the thicker and thicker, dense parts of the forest. It was quiet, but I had noticed that there had been no crickets out at all this night. Having really nice flashlights, we were pursuing to push as far as we could. The part of the forest that we were descending down was a hill that eventually drops off to a steep canyon, which drops off again into a small river that flows around the area. During the daytime, the scenery and the sights are beauties in their own right, but during the night, it could be a death trap. As we're descending down to that point into the thickness of the forest, we hear branches breaking and the sounds of something big moving around just a little past us in the trees and brush. The time of year was not in our favor. Being springtime, everything has grown back, full and lush. You don't have a ton of visibility because of that. The kids and I halted, listening quietly. That's when the 13-year-old started panicking, thinking it was a mountain lion, but I kept trying to signal to him to be quiet and to listen. That's whenever it was stopped making noise. We stood there for a minute, thinking that whatever this supposed mountain lion was doing, that maybe it heard us and walked away. We didn't hear anything though, and had it left the area, we would have heard it trot off into the night. It was just quiet. I kept signaling to the others to slowly start to back away in case it was, and that's when we heard whatever it was start coming towards us in the trees. It sounded so much bigger than any mountain lion because each step it took was a heavy thud. That's when I started to grab the kids and swiftly retreat back up the hill we were coming down. We were all trying not to scream. It was an incredibly scary situation to be in, and I think even the more experienced and tough men of the mountain would have been terrified. I turned around to hopefully, or not hopefully, catch some sort of glimpse of whatever was moving in our direction towards us, and I see this big yellow glowing eyes higher up than I am. That's when I lost it, and just bolted it with the kids out of there. When I saw those eyes, that was enough for me. I never shined my light at them. They were just glowing up there in the trees. Luckily, the kids never saw it because they were busy running up the hill, thinking it was some big mountain lion. I know for a fact that it was for sure not a mountain lion. It was big, tall, and sounded like the weight of a great weight. Why it started aggressively approaching us, I have yet to know. I don't think it bothered to chase us up the hill or anything. When we got out of that thicker part of the forest and the land had flattened out, there was nothing behind us and no signs of anything following behind us. I didn't care. I just got us all back to the house, and that was that. They were freaked out, telling their parents that we went out there and almost got eaten by a huge mountain lion. I played along and agreed, but I know it wasn't a mountain lion. It's probably for the best the kids never know it was either. I will never tell them that and risk scarring them for life, especially about those eyes. It was a scary experience, and it's kept me out of that area at night. I was getting home with my brother from school when we saw a monster just off in the trees right by our house. I was frozen in my tracks, and then my brother saw it too. We never saw this creature in full, but we saw this long snout and long claws holding onto the trees behind the branches, watching us. Then, I got the feeling that it knew that we saw it because it started growling. My brother grabs my arm and motions to me that we need to go book it for the house. I was afraid that whatever this creature was going to chase us, but we risked it anyway, and we started taking off running. I have no idea if it was just a wild animal or something more sinister, but whatever it was, I knew I had to get home as quickly as possible. My brother and I ran up the hill towards our house. We didn't even make it to the top when we heard a loud noise next to us. This creature was following us closely in the trees. It was paralleling us perfectly and keeping up with us with no problems. We were so scared that we didn't even stop to think about what it could be. We just kept running to the front door until we finally got out of range of the creature's sight. We got in the house, slammed the door, and locked it. We could hear a bunch of thrashing around in the trees next to the house, and it went on for a while. My brother and I were scared. We weren't even sure what to do or who to call. Here we are, 12 and 14, and there's a friggin' monster in the trees next to our house. Our parents would never believe us. We hid in our bedrooms, waiting for our mom to get home. My brother and I grabbed the biggest knives we could find and hunkered down. Maybe 20 minutes later, and the noise finally began to die down. Then, it got dead silent outside. Because this was in January, the sun sets here at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening time, so by now it was already dark. My mother got home first, closer to 5:45, and when she came in, she seemed to be spooked or bothered by something. We were nervous to say anything because we were still freaked and didn't want to say anything to her, but she obviously was bothered by something. She acted off because she usually greets us and asks us how our day was, but she didn't this time. She walks right into the kitchen and gets on the phone with what we can discern was the police, talking quietly and looking out the window. My brother and I are standing on top of the stairwell, looking at each other with eyes as big as saucer plates. Something was going on, and in my 12-year-old mind, I was thinking that creature was still out there. My older brother was brave enough to actually go downstairs and ask her what was going on, but she wouldn't answer the question and just reassured him everything was okay. He tells her, "We saw it too, Mom, coming home from school. It was hiding there in the trees." And then I hear him just going off and off, telling her everything that we saw and everything that happened. I was boggled that she wouldn't just acknowledge what we had to say and just left the conversation and walked away. She had a glass of wine and ignored us the rest of the night. It was bizarre. My mother never acted that way. But this was years ago, and I don't know if what we saw had anything to do with that giant animal creature or what. That was a nightmare, and I hope to never relive that again. That's my strange experience. I don't know what we saw or what kind of animal it could have been. It's never been talked about in my family since. Is it possible that it could have been a dogman? I don't know, since I don't really know anything about monsters or cryptids or any of that. But it certainly scared me and my brother to death, and I'm glad that we never encountered it again. I will tell you about the visual encounter that I had with what I believe to be a dogman. I used to have a bunch of thick woods around my old place, and I spent a lot of time hiking in them. I was kind of a loner anyway, so it worked out for me great. My first inkling was that I heard a deer, so I turned around to look, and I seen this creature's face peering at me through the trees. Let me lay the cards out for you here. If you've ever seen those werewolf movies where the creature looks half man, half wolf, short snout, but the face is still very human, that's exactly what I saw. This thing was my height, and it was peering at me through the trees, and I saw more of it than I wanted to see. As soon as I saw it, I flinched and screamed because it looked so horrific. Then it turned around and ran off through the trees. This wasn't far from my house either, maybe 500 feet at the very most, so this kind of shook me. This was just a calm spring afternoon in June, back in '88. I had no idea that an animal like that would ever be hanging out in my backyard in the woods. Literally zero idea. So I run back to my house, call my friend. I'm going crazy, telling him over the phone, you need to get over here. There's this crazy wolf-looking monster out in the backyard of my woods. Let's go kill this son of a gun. He comes over 20 minutes later. We go out there and it's still light out, and he just starts heading out deep into the woods, far beyond where I'm at now. Now, I'm going to explain to you something. Where my house was at the time, it was still really new development. So once you backed into the woods, that was my house. There was a small hill you had to cross over, and then it dipped into a larger valley that would span a few more miles before you hit any more neighborhoods. This friend of mine runs back there, not even 15 minutes back there, and I hear him start firing off his revolver and screaming. He comes running back, white as a sheet, and tells me he saw the thing, fired multiple shots off at this creature, and it charged him, nearly slicing his belly open. Now I'm thinking, oh man, I gotta get the hell out of here. So he offers me his couch to sleep on while I figure all this stuff out. So, long story short, I ended up crashing out on his couch for a while, all the while trying to go back to my house during the day, packing up everything and selling what I could, just to try and get rid of the damn house. I had lived there for 6 months before, and it was a very small one-bedroom house, mind you. I wasn't wanting to deal with it, so I just up and left the house permanently, and left the area for good. Not one of my better moments that I'm particularly proud of, but I felt backed into a corner. When people are pushed into a corner like that, I mean, what are your options? I didn't feel safe. I did not feel comfortable going back there. I had been going back there 4 months at this point, and now all of a sudden, I'm having to deal with some unknown animal. I didn't even bother with the police, because that would have been a joke. They would accuse me of drinking and being a drunk. I didn't expect my friend to come over and charge back there like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie The Predator, but he wanted to check it out for himself, and I felt better having him by my side because he was an experienced, tanky kind of individual. You know, he's a big dude. He lifted weights, didn't take crap from anybody. He's still that way now, a very alpha male kind of personality, but now that he's older, he's got quite the bit of gray on his face. During this time though, we were just both in our 20s, just fresh out of college. So the plot thickens even more. I moved out of the area, and then my friend begins calling me and telling me weird stuff is going on around that entire neighborhood. When I first moved in that neighborhood, houses were very sparse and far apart. Now in 2020, it's fully developed. I don't even think those backwoods are even there anymore because it's all houses in development now. He had other close friends in the neighborhood, but he kept tabs with me. It was a very close-knit kind of neighborhood. Everybody just kind of knew each other. The kind of neighborhood that when there's a big barbecue, everybody was invited. That's just how it was in the 80s. Not at all like nowadays where nobody talks to each other or can make eye contact. Anyway, word got around that people were seeing a strange animal sniffing around their garbage, trying to get into the back of their house. So, the police started investigating, thinking they were robbers trying to get into the houses. But I guess they themselves had a few encounters with the same creature. A close friend of his was telling him that he would hear gunshots at night from the police, and then before you know it, a strong curfew was in place for that neighborhood, telling people not to go outside after 8 p.m. Just crazy stuff that you would only see out of a movie. Well, come to pass in about 4 months, and it finally ended. But from June to October, this kind of stuff was going on. Cats and dogs would go missing, people would have sightings here and there. Real Hollywood kind of stuff. Even though the friend that I had helped me out didn't live in that neighborhood, he still kept his good old revolver close to him at all times, fully loaded. He was not a risk taker. At least not when it came to this kind of thing. I hope you enjoyed my story. I've only actually gotten to tell a handful of people about it, because so seldom few people even believe what I have to say. I've told a few other big YouTube channels now, so maybe my story is out there. But if not, and you choose to read this, I hope your readers enjoy it. Before I end this story, my friend and I are still doing well, and he is still tough as nails. We have both moved away from that area. He's now living down in Austin, Texas, and I live in Missouri currently. At the time, this was in central Pennsylvania, where all of this took place, back in 1988. The first encounter was when I was young and trying to fall asleep. I looked out the window and saw it, out towards the backyard and faced my window at the time. Nowadays, I sleep in the basement. Back on topic, my brother and I always felt nervous looking out the window. My bed perfectly faced the window at the time the beast was 3 feet away, looking into the window. It had yellow eyes, the long snout of a dog, black fur. Its face was kind of human, subtract the snout and the gnarly, long teeth, and fur all over its face. Once it realized I noticed it, it snarled at me quietly through the window, and it was a stare down. I slowly pulled the covers over my head. I then proceeded to cry for what felt like forever. Then, I ran into my parents' room crying, telling me it was just a dream. I thought that for what was like 8 years until my sophomore year in high school when my brother, my friend and I were out fishing. My brother loved peanut butter at the time. He brought a plate with a giant serving-sized spoon glob and some Ritz crackers. There's a creek back there. Surprisingly some decent fish, mostly chub, but there is bullhead, carp, green-bellied sunfish, crayfish, and snapping turtles, brown trout, but that's really rare to catch there. We sometimes thought it'd be funny to throw the chub there and leave them there at our favorite spot. A giant fallen oak tree, which acts like a natural bridge across the creek it fell due to the amount of weight it was bearing, that due to a bad snowstorm. My friend and I went downstream one summer's day. Meanwhile, my brother was fishing alone. He went to go take a leak. He left the food on the other side of the creek. When he came back, he saw it running off with. He described it as more of a Bigfoot. He ran to us hysterical. We just thought he was crazy, so we started calling him Crazy Joey. After that, I thought of my run-in with something similar at the young age and the stare down. Later, my friend was busy with lawn work and prepping to move. I was secretly afraid to go out. Joe decided to come back there a month later. He left by himself. I wish I could have saw to confirm my story, but the second time around I believed him for sure. He was catching some fish, his line was all screwed up, and took it off his fishing and re-spooled it, and he ran and came because he only had one hook on the pole. He ran back and claimed that he had the same thing, chasing the bird that was wrapped up. He yelled and scared it, then ran back home for a knife as fast as he can, then cut it free. I seen something similar to my sighting. My brother, my friend and some others were going to fish at a legal spot we didn't know it was private property at the time. Whenever me and my friends try out new spots, we have the tradition of casting bass lures first, and then using normal live bait. I wanted to hesitate because the fish were biting there pretty good at the creek. So, sure enough, they went ahead of me across the oak tree towards the quarry. I felt alone after 12 minutes. Then I took my bag, 2 poles, and the tackle, I was changing out close to the log. I started walking and saw what I thought to be a big gray wolf easily waist me, being around 5'6". In Illinois, anything's possible. My friend got cornered by 4 coyotes out there once, but sure enough, the creature by another giant oak tree and I made eye contact again. Another stare down, only different since it was on all 4s. It was obviously interested in my friend, since it was following the trail that leads there. I yelled and chased it off. The look on its face was playful, because it was probably pretending not to notice me, so I chased it to the clearing. The retention ponds are on the left and a small prairie on the right. It seemingly went towards the prairie. Sure enough, I quickly forgot when one of my friends caught a big largemouth bass that weighed 3.5 pounds in the first cast. I waited until we were going to leave to inform them because I didn't want to ruin the fact we were catching bass on every cast. But the guard working there gave us a warning and told us to get out of there, and this private property, etc. I told them and they didn't believe me. The last time we saw something similar, me and my brother were scavenging for roadkill when we saw a black dog. Maybe it looked at us, ran away constantly, back it moved gracefully through the brush. Meanwhile, me and my brother were absolutely getting torn up by the raspberry bushes. We catch up, it waits, and then runs away again. We played this game 5 times with that thing, then we couldn't find it again. I live in Roscoe, enjoy being outside. I notice strange things out in the woods. People usually just kick the roadkill off the highway. It can cause an issue if it's big enough like a deer. But I noticed some things went out of its way to drag them out of the prairie. Coyotes maybe. That thing is sure, why not? There's plenty of deer, turkey, rabbits. You can even hear the coyotes get excited when they catch a poor rabbit at night. April 1999. For some background info, I was raised in the deserts, southeast of New Mexico, on 2 different ranches, so I am very well versed in the flora and fauna of our beautiful state. I even used to track semi-professionally for hunters and our local trapper. I know the critters around this state. We have always lived on very remote ranches, 50, sometimes 70 miles from the nearest actual town. My senior year of high school, I moved out on my own, being a part of the DECA program, to live closer to my job and school. Living about 12 miles from a small New Mexico town where my school and job were, seemed like living right in town after all of that. I guess my story starts in April of 1999. My boyfriend and I were rooming with a couple in a trailer house just outside of Lakewood, New Mexico. We rented a room from them and sometimes watched their 2 kids as a part of our rental agreement. For a few weeks that April, a lot of the neighboring landowners have been complaining about wild dogs coming up from the river and harassing their dogs and scaring their livestock. We were about a mile from the Pecos River, and wild dogs have indeed been a problem in the area. One guy had even reported seeing some structural damage to one of his chicken coops. The couple we lived with had 2 dogs, both of them medium-sized terrier mixes, and neither one of them were on the cowardly side. They had been getting very skittish about going outside at night, though. So much so that we had to make sure to let them out right at sunset and again at sunrise, because they would not leave the trailer house that night otherwise. On Saturday night, at about 11 p.m., I know it was a Saturday because I had neither work or school. Near the end of the month, the 4 of us were sitting around watching TV and just basically talking about stuff when the dogs, who were asleep in the master bedroom on the far east side of the house, started growling and barking at the window on the south wall of the bedroom. This was really unusual behavior for them, so we all got up to see what they were on about. By the time we got there, the dogs had shifted their barking away from the window and seemed to be barking at the wall and along the wall, like they could smell something there, but it was moving. It was very strange, and when they came up to the end of the room, their barking just went crazy. Suddenly, from farther down the wall, at the same time, about where the kitchen was, we all heard this loud thump and scuffling sound. It was powerful enough that we actually felt it, with it being an 80 by 16 trailer house and all. The dogs at this point just completely lost it. They cried out a high-pitched whine and just dove under the bed. We all ran out of the bedroom, down the hall, and into the kitchen to see what the heck was up. Peering out of the kitchen window was pointless, as it was late. There was cloud cover, and the moon wasn't even out. We heard the scuffling noise again, and further down the house, and went into the living room to see what was up. We were all really confused at this point. The next few moments seemed to happen in slow motion. Appearing in the living room window from the left and looking right into us from the glass was, I don't know what. From the shoulders up was what I can only describe as a man dog. Its shoulders were quite human, with short, sleek hair, but the head what looked to be that of a Rottweiler. And the teeth, oh my. The teeth on this thing. All four of us screamed at about the same time, and I guess that scared it off, because it just disappeared. That image, though, is forever seared into my head. Also of note, this was a trailer house, so the bottom of that window was easily 6 foot off the ground, meaning this thing was 7 foot something. No matter how big of a dog or wolf it was, it could not have stood up and looked at us like that in the window. The guys, being guys, immediately grabbed their shotguns and headed out the door, even though I told them it was a bad idea. Super dark desert, right? Big unknown critter. No. I guess they were out there looking for it for like 20 minutes before they came back inside and said they could not see a thing. The light from the house shining on it, and it being so close to the window, were the only reasons we saw it in the first place. None of us really slept well that night. It just felt super creepy. The next morning, I got up early and decided to go have a look around to see if there were any tracks to identify what it was. The grass and weeds that were right beside the house pretty much hid any tracks it made there. Although I did find where it looked as if something had clawed at the sliding along the bottom of the house in a couple of places, making the thump and scuffling sounds the night before. I then decided to follow the tracks the guys had made, and that was when I made a second, very unnerving discovery. The guys made clear tracks in the sandy dirt, and whatever it was out there did well, because it was pretty much circling them the entire time they were out there, at a distance of about 40 feet. The tracks were huge, canine, and switched back and forth from 4 tracks to 2, meaning it was walking bipedally for at least half the time it circled them. Just creepy. My dad and mom had taken my little brother and sister to Tucson to do something for the day. We lived in a trailer in a rural area outside of Sierra Vista. We had 2 horses, 2 dogs, a cow, and chickens on a small amount of land that we had. As the oldest son, and being 17, it was my job to feed and take care of them. On the night in question, it was a stormy monsoon rain, with thunder and lightning going on. But, like monsoons can be, they rage and then settle into a lull, and rage again. I was getting ready to settle down and watch a good movie, when all of a sudden, my 2 dogs started barking and wouldn't shut up. When I told them to calm down, in the previous week or so before that, my dogs had been acting up and barking a lot at night. I attributed this to coyotes that I had heard and howling in just the nighttime, so I got my dad's .30-30 and just 1 bullet, in case I had to shoot to scare off the coyote or killed it if rabid. I rested the loaded rifle near the wall by the back door and turned on the floodlights just outside the trailer. The rain had just now stopped, so I looked out by the window near the front door and saw 2 of our horses and cows staring, as if through the front door, to the back door of the trailer where the dogs were barking. I thought, maybe they're scared of the coyotes. So I grabbed the rifle and opened up the back door. As I was getting near the back door, I heard my dogs whimpering and crying. Now I was thinking, could it be a pack of coyotes? So I put a few bullets in my pocket, figuring I could load them if I didn't like what I saw. I opened the door and the darndest thing happened. My 2 dogs beeline rush past me to the center of the trailer and hunker down in the kitchen. Mud is everywhere on the floor, from their paws, and now I'm pissed because I have to clean it up. So I close the door and go to try to get my dogs to get out, but they wouldn't budge and squirmed out of my arms when I tried to grab them. They were terrified. Now I was mad at the coyotes and grabbed the rifle to go run them off or kill them. The trailer sits on a foundation of blocks. The front and back doors are accessible by a set of small stairs. I'm 5'6", by the way. I opened the back door and was looking out in the darkness at that point. I was about to step out when I saw a set of eyes looking back at me out of the darkness. From the top of my head in the trailer to the ground is around 7+ feet or so, and here is a set of eyes looking at me, level and square on. I'm like, darn, coyote must be on the small gravel hill we used to pave the road, or it's a bird on a mesquite bush. But I was thinking to myself, that monsoon was awfully bad and rained hard. What kind of bird would hunker down on a mesquite bush? And why would a coyote be out in a downpour? So I'm raising my rifle and drawing a bead on the eyes when lightning lights up the night. All of a sudden, the lightning illuminates the small gravel hill. That's like 6 feet high, and the surrounding mesquite bushes. The light winks out as fast as it appeared. From the lightning, though, there was nothing on the gravel hill, and no bird of any on the mesquite bushes. Then it dawned on me. Whatever it was very tall and was still staring at me. A sense of dread crept over me all of a sudden, as I realized that the .30-30 only had one measly bullet, and if I missed, there was no way I'd be able to reload before it was on me. I kept the gun pointed at it, as I quickly closed the door. I locked the door, realizing this trailer would never withstand whatever it was out there if it attacked. I locked the front door and turned on all the lights in the house. I grabbed the bullets of the .30-06 and .22 rifle, then go into the kitchen with the dogs and I loaded each rifle full on. I hugged my dogs and prayed that whatever it was went away and did not attack. I stayed awake the whole night until my parents got back. My dad was furious that the lights were on, but my dad checked outside for coyotes, but whatever it was gone. I grew up in a town called Hawthorne, located in Nevada. Hawthorne is located right next to Walker Lake. The main highway leading from Hawthorne to Reno is Highway 95, which, if you use Google Earth or Google Maps, you can see runs right between Walker Lake and a mountain range. This creates a small area of highway that is affectionately known to the locals as the Cliffs. When I was 14, my grandparents, mom, and I were coming home late from a long day of doctor's appointments in Reno. My grandfather was driving, and we hit the Cliffs a little after 11:30 p.m. I was in the passenger seat to help keep my grandfather awake, but I still just think it was so I would sing him folk songs. Anyway, about a third of the way around the Cliffs, heading toward Hawthorne, there is a small area where the road pulls away from the mountain and creates a small alcove area. As we started to come up on it, we saw a large animal crossing the road, dragging another animal in its mouth, and it stopped in this alcove. Grandpa thought at first that I might get my first look at a live mountain lion, so he slowed down. When we got within 100 feet of it, he turned on the brights of the car. To our surprise, it was no mountain lion. We only had a couple of seconds to look at it after Grandpa turned on the brights, because right after the light hit, whatever it was, it turned to look at us 1 second, and the next, it leapt straight up the side of the mountain and out of sight, leaving the mangled body of a fox. Grandfather hit the gas and the old Buick we were in jumped, waking up the woman in the back seat. I had never seen my grandfather truly scared before, but even he was physically shaking afterward. I remember the sheer bulk of the thing, and the fact that it looked like a really large bodybuilder when it jumped in the same fashion as a human, with its arms reaching up toward the rocks almost over its head. It had long, thick fur, but you could see the muscle definition. I don't remember the facial features, but I remember the pure terror when that thing turned and looked at the car with shining yellow eyes. I even pissed myself. I have come practically face to face with a polar bear, and I wasn't as scared as when we saw this thing. Now, I don't believe in werewolves, and I haven't seen anything like it since, but I hope I never do again. On August 27th, 2016, my 10-year-old grandson was sitting in a car at a restaurant parking lot. This occurred in San Francisco, California. He was waiting for his paternal grandmother. Across the street from him, on a sidewalk, he noticed a large creature, which I determined to be 7 to 8 foot tall, from talking with him. It was walking on 2 legs towards a wooded area at the end of a sidewalk and disappeared into some brush. The creature did not appear concerned about my grandson, as it was in no hurry. When I asked him about what he had seen, he described a classic canine-type dogman with red eyes. His distance from this creature was around 30 feet. Dali City is a semi-rural, with many pockets of woodlands and some tracts of forest here and there. The area where he saw the creature has paved roads and sidewalks, ringed with areas of trees. This occurred in 1953. The encounter I'd like to share is not my own, but that of my mother. She used to tell me stories when I was young about strange things that she had experienced in her lifetime. I remember this dogman type of encounter. There's not particularly a lot of detail to this encounter, but what you might find interesting is the location. The sighting took place in Sacramento, California, around 1953, not too far from our state's capital. Using Google Maps to get an approximate location and lay of the land, I can see the sighting area was about 1,000 feet to the west and perpendicular to the American River. Across the river from the east bank, it's only about another 2,000 feet east to the state capital. So, this took place fairly close to a heavily populated area. My mother states when she was about 12 years old, she was lying on the couch watching TV. That's when she noticed a scary dog face looking at her through a low-pane window. The window was on either side by the door. I'm unclear of this fact. In any event, the head, she said, must have been about 2 to 2.5 feet above the ground. She covered her face in fright with her pillow. After a minute or so, she snuck a peek, figuring she just might be imagining things. She saw it and was gone, and felt a little better. Then she noticed it was now looking through another higher window. Its head was now about 4 to 4.5 feet above the ground, according to her recollection. There was nothing outside that window for a dog to stand on. At that point, she just ran to another room in terror. She doesn't really recall what happened after that. She describes the animal as being dark gray, with glowing red eyes, seemingly panting or baring its teeth. She didn't see the body, but had the impression that it was thin. Unfortunately, she doesn't recall the time of day, month, or season. My parents tell me there's likely some American Indian burial grounds in the area, as there have been excavations near the river, which yielded Native American arrowheads and other artifacts. I know it's been mentioned in some of the encounters, a proximity to rivers and Native American burial grounds. I even asked my mother if there was cornfields in the area, since that has been mentioned in the encounters before. She said only a small patch of corn stalks in their own backyard. I don't think that qualifies. The area around my grandparents' house was not really wooded. The neighborhood was mostly large fields with a few horses and some cattle. The areas around the river is wooded now, and though was probably a lot more so in 1953 than it is today. Another paranormal story about this area is that on Monster Quest's episode detailing the Mothman, someone supposedly was taking dusk or night shot pictures of the Tower Bridge in 2009 and saw a flying humanoid shape or something fly off a bridge. The Tower Bridge is in the 1,000 foot range from my grandparents' house. Spooky, and that's all there really is. This happened in March of 2017. It was 2:30 a.m., and another night of not being able to sleep due to back pain. I was lying on my side, reading, when my very close by neighbor's motion detector light turned on. This does happen from time to time. When it turns on, it lights up the entire side of my house. We have lived here 9 years, and I have never once seen anything walk past my bedroom window at night. since I was facing my large bedroom window. The very bright motion detector light going off caught my attention. I looked up and saw the side silhouette of a dogman. I exclaimed. It was walking past my bedroom window. I saw it from mid-shoulders up. The shoulders were huge and its head was huge. It had pointed ears like a German shepherd dog and a long snout. Its mouth was slightly open, as I saw a large tongue that seemed to be lolling to the side of its mouth. When I saw this creature and spoke those words, I could swear that the thing slowed down, smirked, and then kept on going. That's all I saw that night. Last week, though, while in my bedroom again, I heard something huge land on the ground behind my bedroom wall. That wall has no windows. I heard a deep, raspy kind of breathing. I started praying, pleading the blood of Jesus over my house, grounds around it and all. I do this most nights, but sometimes I forget. I'm awake most nights until 3 a.m. or later due to having severe spinal issues as well as fibromyalgia. We live in a lovely manufactured home community. There are lots of trees around here, and it's very close to canals, large open fields, and woods. I know this is what I saw, but the fact that I saw it has left me amazed. Why is it that when so many are also seeing them? I guess I just thought since I'm in the house most of the time due to my health, I would never see them. The space between my neighbor's house and ours is about 10 feet. My husband went outside weeks later, once I got the courage to tell him that this had happened, and measured the area by the window. That dogman had to be at least 8 feet tall. What concerns me greatly is that no one in the police department or government will alert people to their existence. People are walking around feeling a false sense of security. I know I did. I won't even try to walk outside anymore. And yes, I have cautioned my neighbors, the ones with the security light. I can't think of any other details right now, but it's important for you to know that several years ago, a homeless woman was camping out down by the river here in Albany, Oregon. She was found dead, and her tent was torn up. I believe the police report in the newspaper said she was torn up as well, but I honestly can't remember any of the details. To the best of my knowledge, no one was ever caught for that crime. This is a sleepy town, just over 50,000 people here in Lynn County. We no longer get the newspaper, so I have no idea if this happened again. I do know that a couple was down by that same area and saw a dogman. It really frightened them badly. I heard about that on another YouTube channel, so I just want people to be aware so they don't go out at night anymore, especially near the river. But then, we're not near a river, and I saw one in the middle of the night.